Yeah, it's only 11:30 now, Vibhuti.
That's right.
So we have about 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Shalu.
Namaste and greetings. I, Shweta Shankar, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav Evam Niti Anusandhan Sansthan, Nai Delhi, extend my warmest welcome to you all to IMPRI #Web Policy Learning. Today we are gathered here for day 10 of Law and Public Policy Youth Fellowship, an online national summer school program, a 2-month online immersive legal awareness and action research certificate training course and internship program. This program is organized by the IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, New Delhi. The chair for the program is Professor Vibhuti Patel, visiting distinguished professor at IMPRI, and the fellowship lead advisor and expert legal hands-on session is Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam, visiting senior fellow, IMPRI. The distinguished experts include Shri Sandeep Chachra, Professor Vibhuti Patel, Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam, Advocate Dr. Wahida Nainer, Professor Mukul Asher, Professor Uday Shankar, Shri Udit Mishra, Dr. Nivedita P. Haran, Shri Bhartendra Singh Baswan, Advocate Dr. Albertina Almeida, Dr. Gladstone Xavier, Advocate Audrey de Mello, Dr. Kaustuv Bandyopadhyay, Advocate Mrinalini Deshmukh, Professor Sharmila Ghuge, Advocate Flavia Agnes, Dr. Rashmi Singh, Mr. Debaditya Sinha, Professor Swaran Singh, Advocate Lara Jisani, Justice Ajit K. Singh, Mr. Himanshu Shekhar, Dr. Amar Jisani, Dr. Soumyadip Chattopadhyay, Mr. Bilal Khan, Shri Rajiv Ranjan Singh, Shri Tikender Singh Panwar, Shri Shailesh Gandhi, Dr. Simi Mehta, Advocate Abdul Hafiz Gandhi, Professor Amita Singh, Dr. Ajay Gudavarti, Shri Amit Dubey, Professor Sangamitra Acharya, Dr. Y. Suresh Reddy, Advocate Sanchita N, Shri Surendranath Tripathi. The conveners for this course are Dr. Simi Mehta, CEO and Editorial Director at IMPRI, Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam, Visiting Senior Fellow, IMPRI, and Dr. Arjun Kumar, Director at IMPRI. I welcome you all to this enlightening deliberation and thank you for putting your time, efforts, and energy into truly understanding the vital role and complex intricacies of legal and public policy frameworks. We have also shared the course outline and reading resources document in your email for your kind perusal. We will be providing videos of each session for flexible learning at your place and pace. Before we start today's session, I would like to announce the housekeeping rules. First, it is imperative that you join the meeting on time. Second, there will be a Q&A session after each presentation. Third, share your questions in the Q&A box and not in the chat box. The questions must not be posted as an anonymous attendee. Ensure that your questions are precise. Refrain from making general comments in the question to save time. Our session for day 10 will cover topics of Navigating the Criminal Justice System by Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam, Legal and Social Practice Gendered by Advocate Audrey de Mello, Civil Society, Laws, Public Policies, and Impact by Dr. Kaustuv Bandyopadhyay. To start the session, I would like to invite Professor Vibhuti Patel for her opening chair remarks. Ma'am, over to you.
Thank you, Shweta, for inviting me to give chairperson's remark. And first of all, I would like to offer thanks to IMPRI team led by Dr. Arjun Singh, Dr. Simi Mehta, and Dr. Shalu Nigam. And welcome Dr. Audrey de Mello, Dr. Kaustuv Bandyopadhyay, and esteemed participants. Today, we are in the 4th week and the 10th session of this online summer school program on law and public policy. And we started with a macro analysis and the overall understanding of the symbiotic relationship between law and public policy in the first week. In the second week, where we discussed so many important features and the salient features of policy initiatives by the Indian and the role of Indian judiciary and also the role of media. And in the third week, we reflected on the governance issues about urban governance, about state budgets, about local government bodies' role, and also the question, the role of social workers in peace building and the community development, this thing. And we had in the 4th week, like we had we are now going to have discussion on the important understanding on the social practices that we have. The key words in all these previous 9 lectures were about the people's participation, role of judicial activism, public interest litigation, and the question of intersectional analysis of varied forms of multiple marginalities faced by different sections of population, and to what extent state can play important role in providing human development initiatives in terms of publicly funded subsidized education or right to work. And that from that perspective, the last lecture, the lecture on the 9th session was very important. And we had 3 sessions where Professor Aruna Roy spoke on social security, law and public policy. She delineated the experiences of Mazdoor Kisan Sangram Samiti, and in terms of right to education, right to food, and right to information act, how they put it in place. Advocate Nikhil, they mesmerized the participants by illuminating account of campaigns such as Hamara Paisa, Hamara Hisab, and Hum Janenge, Hum Jeetenge or Jiyenge. And he also talked about the People's Charter presented to government of Rajasthan. He says that whatever may happen, we need to engage with the government. Sometimes we may have adversarial role, but we also need to, it's the state, engaging with the state in a creative way and mobilizing public opinion in favor of social sector demands of social protection and social security are very important. The last presentation by Professor Albertina Almeida on inclusion, law and public policy went into the details of all the sections provided under the major rubric of Article 15 and 16 of the fundamental rights, and also the directive principles, Article 46, in which she discussed various sections about the proportionate representation in the, and also in the post, in the educational institutions, the importance of quota. She deconstructed several terminologies such as creamy layer, definition of backward caste, other backward caste, then quota and maintenance list, the list which is maintained by Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, and also the affirmative actions in terms of scheduled class plan and tribal sub-plan to compensate for the historical injustices. And she said that you can never compare the achievements or the performance of the upper caste with those who have been marginalized and underserved historically. So we need to have a special, we have to privilege them when it comes to opportunities. She ended by emphasizing that you can't have equality among unequals. We need to have substantive equality with the help of special provisions to ameliorate social inequality, and grassroots mobilization should never stop, even when we get the legal provision. So we must act at the community level, and that is very important. You can't completely depend on the state. Civil society has to be proactive. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Now we have the session by Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam, who will be taking on the topic Navigating the Criminal Justice System. Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam is a visiting senior fellow at IMPRI, an advocate, author, researcher, gender and human rights. Welcome, ma'am, and over to you.
Good morning to all of you. So today we will continue with the criminal justice system. Because last time we spoke about in details about how the criminal justice system. Last time we spoke about the criminal justice system, how to file FIR, and all the other nitty-gritties of how the trial start and what are the process, how police conduct investigations. So today we will talk about another aspect of criminal justice system, and we will talk about how the crime against children and crime against women are increasing over the years. By even when we have such good laws on paper, but then if you look at the data, you can see how the crime against women and children are increasing consistently over the years. So the NCR, National Crime Record Bureau, this data shows that 95% of cases about the child rape, the offenders are known to the victim, And it says that 4 child victims every year, or a child, the children who are sexually abused every 15 minutes. And according to a study in 2007 conducted by India's Ministry of Women and Child Development, it says that 53% of children surveyed said that they have been subjected to some form of sexual abuse. So when we talk about, in the schools, we talk about good touch and bad touch. When I was studying the school, we don't have this kind of concept. And many of people, they grew up just listening to the Bollywood music and, the misogyny in the Bollywood, the films. But then if legally we see that the issue of consent. Now, consent generally involve, it should be active. It, no means no and yes means yes. And it should be voluntary, it should be ongoing, and the person should be knowing that the person should be fully conscious while giving the consent. So in law, these are the things which are important when we talk about the aspect of consent. So if we see the history of consent in the post-independent India, the very first important case is Mathura's rape case. Now this incident happened in 1972 on 26th March, where Mathura, who is a young tribal girl, she fell in love with one of the person, and both the families, they disapprove of their relationship, and one of the family complained to the police station, and the policemen, they called both the families, and then after discussion, all the other family members were sent out, and Mathura was, detained in the police station, and she was raped within the police station premises. So the session court in 1974, they found defendants not guilty, and they state because Mathura was habituated to sexual intercourse, her consent was voluntary, and this was, it can't be said that it is a rape. On appeal, the High Court set aside the judgment of Session Court and sentenced the accused to, 1 and 5 year imprisonment. And the court held that the passive submission due to fear induced by serious threat would not be construed as consent or willing intercourse. But when the case went to Supreme Court in 1979, the Supreme Court acquitted the accused. It says that Mathura had raised no alarm. There were no visible marks of injury on her body, and there was no struggle, so there is no rape. Now, this is how the court construed the concept of consent. But because of this judgment, it raised a lot of outrage, and 4 professors, Professor Upendra Bakshi, Raghunath Kelkar, Professor Lotika Sarkar, and Vasudha Thagabba, they wrote an open letter to the Supreme Court, and they protest, how the court defined the concept of consent. So, and there was a lot of protest and demonstration. And after that, there was Criminal Law Amendment Act was introduced. And in 1983, there were amendments which were made in the rape laws, and custodial rape was made punishable. And, beside defining custodial rape, the amendment shifted the burden of proof from the, accuser to the accused. It also added provision of in-camera trials, prohibition of victim identity discourse, and tougher sentences. Another case which is important in terms of consent and how the courts have taken another kind of view, that in 1988, IAS officer Rupendra Bajaj, she spoke about the harassment she faced at the hand of senior police officer KPS Gill. And this case was much highlighted then. And on 20th August 1988, the High Court of Punjab and Haryana upheld Gill's conviction under Section 354, that is outraging the modesty of women, and Section 509, insulting a lady by the words and gestures. In 2005, the Supreme Court upheld the charges and conviction of Gill, and he was spared from undergoing 3 months jail sentence. Rupendra Bajaj declined to accept the monetary compensation, and this case, you can read the interview about Rupendra Bajaj interview on the internet. It's there. And then we come to the Delphi protest. We have seen, how we have some of the people, they have raised slogans like "Take off Azadi." But after the Nirbhaya protests, like in past few years, a lot of cases have happened, and some people tried to raise voice, but the voices were suppressed, and all the things were happening. But the important concept is the Justice Verma Committee report, which was which came out during that point of time, and it was formulated, and the committee submitted its reports within few days, and it says that criminal law should provide quicker trials and enhance punishment for criminals. It made recommendations on law relating to rape, sexual harassment, trafficking, child sexual abuse, medical examination of victim, and educational reforms. The committee was of the view that rape and sexual assault are not merely crimes of passion, but an expression of power. It recognized marital rape as a crime, and it also rejected the proposal of chemical castration. And it opined that death penalty should not be awarded for the offense of rape, as it may not have deterrence consequences, and it recommended life imprisonment instead of death penalty. And the committee also made acid attack an offense, and it says that the two-finger test, which was done earlier to ensure that the victim is not habituated to sex, so that they have said that shouldn't be done. It is a violation of women's rights. And the committee suggested for setting up of rape crisis cell to provide legal assistance to the victims. And it says that police are duty bound to register the complaint and to report any case that comes to their knowledge. And if the police fails to perform their duty, they must be held liable for punishment. They also talked about conducting literacy program for children, and also they made suggestion for reform in the Representation of People Act, and it says that candidates should be disqualified if one is facing criminal charges for sexual offense. So it was a very detailed report. And after that, Criminal Law Amendment Act was amended in 2013, and certain offenses were added and some laws were changed. So acid attack was recognized as a crime, and it says that if somebody is doing this kind of crime, he could be punished for 10 years of imprisonment, and it could be up to life imprisonment. And throwing an acid, again, it's made punishable. And as a consequences, in Lakshmi versus Union of India in 2015, the Supreme Court said in a case where a 16-year-old girl was attacked with acid, they say that we need to ensure that these kind of things shouldn't happen. And they also given a guideline about that the sale of the acid should be regulated. And they also provide compensation, the compensation scheme for the victims. So the law has been changed now. So now Section 354A has been added, which talks about sexual harassment offense. Though we already have this sexual harassment law, which is protection. We have spoken about that. So, but again, here also within the Indian Penal Code, if somebody is making a physical contact or demanding sexual favors or doing such kind of act, that person could be punished depending on the severity of the offense. So, and the employers are being obligated to report the offense. Then if somebody is using criminal force to disturb a woman or forcing her to be naked, that person could be punished with minimum imprisonment of 3 to 7 years, and fine could be imposed. If somebody is, the Delhi High Court in one of its recent judgment, it clarified that peeping inside a washroom where a woman is taking a bath is a crime, and also watching or taking photos of women when they engage in private activity is a crime. Then stalking somebody is also considered as a crime, and if somebody is monitoring a woman using internet or monitoring her email or other electronic communication, that that person could be imprisoned for 3 years, and for repeated offenders it could be a higher punishment. And So all these kind of activities, even stalking by physically or on the internet, these are considered as crime. And amendments were also made in the provision of rape. So earlier it was only penetrative sex, which was considered as rape. So now oral sex, or inserting any other object or any other thing will be considered as a part of rape. And the minimum punishment is 10 years and imprisonment, and which could extend to life imprisonment. And for custodial death, the punishment has been enhanced. So we have a case of Aruna Schonberg. Now she was raped in a hospital by a person over there, and then she was left into vegetative state for quite a long time. And one of their friend, like her friend, they filed the case in the Supreme Court for for mercy killing, but then the court rejected. So there was a whole history about that. But in such cases, the person who committed the crime for these kind of crimes, the punishment has been increased from 20 years to life imprisonment. So in case of separation also, the punishment has been enhanced. And if a person who is serving as a jail authority, or as a the person in power in institution for women and children, or in hospital, and in such cases the punishment has been enhanced from 5 years to 10 years. In cases of gang rape, the punishment could be minimum for 20 years to life imprisonment, and for repeated offenders it could be up to death sentence also. And considering the crimes which were happening, because the crimes didn't stop even after making stringent law. So again in 2018, considering various cases which were coming, and also mostly of the child being raped and other things, some more amendments were made. And now if somebody is raping a child under the age of 12 years, that person could be imprisoned for 20 years, and he could be up to the remainder's life of the person, or the person could be given death sentence. In cases of gang rape of a girl who is under the age of 16, the punishment could be life imprisonment. And if the girl is under 12, the punishment again could be life imprisonment or death sentence. So under the IT Act also, certain provisions have been made. And also, as we have discussed earlier, that police officers or who are the public servant or hospital authorities, if they fail to discharge their duties, if they fail to register the FIR, or providing assistance to the victim, or providing her medical help, they could also be punished for failing to discharge their duties. So and the punishment could be 6 months to up to 10 years. And then certain relief measures have been proposed for the victims of sexual offense. So the recording of the statement, as we have discussed earlier, that should be done by only female police officer. The person the female shouldn't be called to a police station. And it is being said that if the victim is mentally or physically disabled, then the recording of statement should be done at the residence or any other convenient place in presence of a special educator, and that recording could be videotaped. And there are also provisions for assistance of interpreter or special educators, and videography of statement could be done, and measures could be taken so that if the victim is under 16 years, or she shouldn't be confronted with the accused while during the cross-examination. And it is the duty of the hospital to provide treatment free of cost to the victim of sexual offenses, and to inform the police authorities immediately. Then again, as we have discussed earlier, that previous sexual experience shouldn't be used as as evidence. And during the trial, the character or the previous sexual experience of the victim is irrelevant, as we have seen in Mathura's case, they have tried to raise that issue. So now here the provisions are now being made that that shouldn't be done. And it is said that, it's sufficient for victim of sexual offense to state before the court in her evidence that she has not consented to sexual intercourse. So, so the consent has to be, the court can't say that, that, as we have seen earlier, that that she is habituated to sexual intercourse, and the kind of questions which cannot be asked in the cross examination. So the defense lawyer cannot say that the victim is of immoral kind of person. So these are the provisions which are there. Then Protection of Children from Sexual Offense Act was also made in 2012. And the purpose of this act was to address the crime of sexual abuse and exploitation of children. And the objective of this act are to protect the children from the offense of sexual assault, harassment, and pornography. And for such purpose, special courts are being created. And it defines a child as anyone below the age of 18 years. The law is gender neutral, and in cases of both boys and girls, if they are being exploited, action could be taken. And the law regards the best interest and well-being of child as of paramount importance, and it talks about the rights and dignity of children. And it addresses the wide range of sexual offense, which include anything from stalking a child, showing pornography, or sexual assault. So the law is very detailed, and it does not recognize consent given by children, because it presumes that children are not in position to consent. So the concept of consent couldn't be evoked in such of the cases. And if there's aggravated sexual assault cases, then punishment could be higher, it could be 10 years to life imprisonment. And the law places burden of proof on the accused. And but recently, what we are seeing is that a lot of judgments are coming, from the courts, that where the law is, what we have seen on paper, it's not being followed. So recently, Madhya Pradesh High Court in March 2021, it says that it granted a bail to the rape accused, and it says that the woman should tie Rakhi to the accused. Now, this was really objected by the women lawyers and the women's movement, and a lot of people, and a petition was filed by 9 women lawyers. And in that petition, the court says that such stereotypes should be avoided, and the court issue the direction for sensitization of judges and lawyers. It says that it is gross trivialization of trauma which is being suffered by the complainant. So the court issued a detailed guideline in this case, and it says that bail conditions should not mandate or require contact between the accused and the victim. It says that in all cases where bail is granted, the complainant should immediately be informed, and the copy of the bail order be given to her within 2 days, so that she can challenge that order in case if she feels she wants to do that. Bail conditions and orders should avoid reflecting stereotypical or patriarchal notions about women and their place in society. And it also says that discussion about dress, behavior, or past conduct or moral of the victim should not enter the verdict while granting the bail. The court also says that the courts should refrain from suggesting or entertaining any notion towards compromise between the victim and the accused to get married, or as in this case they talked about tying the Rakhi. It says that there could be no mediation in the criminal cases. So what are the rights of the survivors? Many a times the woman says that their FIR is not being filed. So now the court says that the person can file 0 FIR. We spoke about this earlier. The person can also talk about right to compensation. The trial should be, with the full dignity, and it should be speedy, and protection of women's rights should be there. And, again, the guidelines have been issued by various courts in various cases about, revealing the name and identity of the victim, about, providing protection to the victims of the crime. So also in the Information Technology Act, certain changes have been made, and identity theft is recognized as a crime that is punishable, and cyber hacking, or, falsely or dishonestly using another person's electronic signatures, password, and other kinds of actions, they are being now penalized for 3-year imprisonment and fine of ₹1 lakh. And if the right to privacy is breached, again, you can be penalized. If there is obscene content which is being published, transmitted, or distributed, again, there are punishment for 3 years, and then it could be extended to 5 years. Then publishing, transmitting, or aiding in the transfer of sexually explicit material, again, this is a crime, and again, there are penalties. So because we have seen in several cases which are coming to the court, where a person has created a fake profile on Facebook or on the social media accounts, and just to cause insult or harassment to the victim, and the courts have taken very strict action in such cases. So before ending my presentation, I'll just try to play this video if it plays. Can you see that?
No, ma'am.
Not visible?
No, ma'am. Could you click on it again, ma'am? On the link?
They click on it again. It's visible now?
No, ma'am, we are still on your presentation screen.
Maybe I'll just stop sharing, and
I
then
think you can copy paste the link on chat
yeah, I'll just do that.
if it is possible. Otherwise, I can.
Is it visible now? I'll just.
No, ma'am, it's still not visible.
Yeah, I'll just copy paste this link. So, so with this, I'll just, end my presentation. And the link I'll just share. Why it's not sharing? So maybe I'll just try to share. Meanwhile, we can have question answers.
Sure, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am, for such an enlightening and insightful session. I request Professor Vibhuti, ma'am, to share her remarks.
Yeah, I think my first very important presentation about gender-based violence, and especially violence against women. Dr. Shalu Nigam has started from the first 1972, like Mathura rape case, and also the kind of outrage we had, and we had a nationwide anti-rape movement, women's groups even encircled the parliament demanding amendments in the rape law. She also mentioned Aruna Shanbag case way back in 1978. That was the time when all the people in KEM hospital, I was new to city of Mumbai, and the people used to do victim blaming by saying that she was Chatak Chandni. Chatak Chandni in Marathi is that oversmart. And that boy from Haryana, the accused ward boy who raped her, but it was the team of women teachers in the KEM hospital who played a very important role. Nearly for 30 years, they stood by Aruna Shanbag. There are so many plays and film and public debates around a question of euthanasia also took place. And the KEM team, now also KEM team is the first one to start gender in medical education. In fact, they are continuing the gender course also. So it's a very laudable work that they have done. And also so many state governments have also now come up with the compensation for the child rape survivors. The only thing which is missing here is, and that is also the accusation of Dalit feminists, that nobody talked about Priyanka Bhutmange, who was raped around the same time when Jyoti Singh was raped. So if you happen to be from a middle class, educated, urban in the urban areas, English speaking, then people in the media and the state and the politicians, they ought to respond. But Priyanka Bhutmange, a brave girl in rural areas of Vidarbha region, where she refused to surrender her land because to the bullies of the village. And they said, but your father doesn't have a son. So who is going to, in any case, cultivate the land after he dies? So just surrender it. And she said, no, I will cultivate the land. And she started, after her school, she would work on her field. And the upper caste man who got enraged by these girls, Dalit girls, guts and boldness, they publicly not only raped her, they paraded her naked. Her mother was raped, paraded naked, and everyone in the family was mercilessly, brutally killed in a very, very barbaric fashion to teach lessons to rising consciousness among Dalit women. In fact, there is a very good book written on Dalit women recently published by Shilpa Kamble, and that gives the vivid description of the new uprising that is happening. If you see the NCRB data by caste, the highest number of gang rapes have been against Dalit women, and it is very much rooted in the political economy, because all the resources, whether it is a potable drinking water or electricity or schools or hospitals, all are in the Savarna Basti, in the village. If you see, Dalits have to live out in the outskirts of the village. And when they go to access these resources, that is the time they get raped. No? So I think it's very important to contextualize and understand the socio-economic, cultural background of how the rape takes place and the power relations and the power play that takes place. And that is why we have to make extra effort, as I think in the previous session, both Dr. Aruna Roy and Mr. Day also told us that you have to go walk extra mile to see to it that those who are underserved, those who are silenced, those who are exploited, and who are never given any voice, we have to be, the participants, you and me, we have to amplify their voice. So I think these are the lessons. Thank you, Dr. Shalu Nigam, for a brilliant presentation.
Thank you, ma'am. Now the floor is open for questions from the audience.
I have a question. So, ma'am, as we all know that sex is a very taboo topic in India. So, how should we approach sex education in India from a legal point of view? Like, should it be mandated by law as a part of the primary education in schools?
Oh, Shalu ma'am's connection got disconnected. Yeah. We can go to that start next session. We can take this question later, huh? Nikita, when ma'am will come, then we will repeat. For now, let us invite Audrey ma'am. Go ahead.
Moving forward, we have Advocate Audrey de Mello, who will be taking a session on the topic legal and social practice gender. Advocate Audrey de Mello is the director of the Majlis legal sector in Mumbai. Thank you, ma'am, and over to you. Ma'am, you are not.
Yeah, please unmute yourself.
Thank you so much, Shweta and the team at IMPRI, and also especially Vibhuti ma'am, who always ensures inclusivity and representation from different, people working in different areas. Just looking at the lineup of speakers is just so impressive. And I think only Vibhuti ma'am can put together something like that. So as participants, I think you are extremely lucky to be part of this course. My name is Audrey DeMello, and I work with Majlis. Majlis is a legal center for women and children. We started way back in 1991, 35 years ago. And the founders of Majlis were part of the women's movement. And it was very interesting to watch Professor Shalu's presentation on the whole trajectory of the rape law in India. Majlis started as a legal center to provide support to women and children because, as part of your earlier presentations, you would have learned that 80s was really a decade for laws for rights for women and children, especially in the area of violence against women. We got Section 498A, which addressed, cruelty to wives, and it talked about it being a criminal offense. We had the dowry law amended. We had PCPNDT laws in place. We had, later we got the Domestic Violence Act. We got family courts in India to especially look at issues of violence in a very safe and space that women could come and meet the judiciary, speak to the judiciary about the issues they were facing. When it came to rape law, the whole movement started with the rape law amendment in 1983, where, Professor Shalu spoke about all the rights that women got. And thereafter, if you look at, I tried to create a chart of all the amendments that came thereafter, either through law amendments or through Supreme Court guidelines or judgments. We had a plethora of what we call rights for women and children, both in the area of domestic violence and rape. In fact, when students who are doing research come to me and say, ma'am, but we need this law and we need that law, I keep telling them, we don't need any more laws. As a country, especially India as a country, we have some of the best laws to protect women and children. Of course, our rights, as you know, and you would have done a lecture, I hope, on the constitutional rights that are provided to women and children. We have Article 15(3) in the Constitution, which says that the state can make, we have equality, but the state can make special schemes or laws for women, and the state has done that. The Constitution guarantees us right to life, and the definition of right to life extends to living a life free of violence, free of any abuse. And we are 75 years through that process. We sit here today talking about shining India, and we talk about how much we have achieved as a nation. And yet, if you look at the status of women in terms of especially these two areas that I personally work extensively on, which is domestic violence and rape, we have not moved. We have not moved forward. In fact, if you ask me, we have moved backward. If you take the issues of domestic violence, 20 years ago, they said 1 in 3 women face domestic violence, but we all know that everyone knows at least several women who are facing domestic violence, our aunts, our sisters, our mothers, ourselves. And it is so rampant because initially there was an understanding that domestic violence would mean physical abuse. But that's not the definition of domestic violence. Domestic violence also includes emotional abuse, verbal abuse, sexual abuse, economic abuse. Not giving her maintenance for her and her children is domestic violence. And so with this broad definition of domestic violence, how far have we progressed? How many women are facing domestic violence, and how many of them are even speaking up? I'm not even talking about access to justice. That's a far, far dream. But how many women are even speaking up, are talking about this to their friends, to their family, and trying to, at least speak about what they are facing? Because the humiliation and the victim blaming, if you speak up, about violence, whether it is domestic violence or rape, is squarely put on the woman. If it is domestic violence, she would be asked why, what are you doing wrong that you are facing this domestic violence? Or she would be told that she needs to adjust and she needs to manage better so that this doesn't happen to her. And every time victims of domestic violence try to approach somebody, try to speak to somebody, they are told to keep quiet, to adjust, to not complain. And so we see very, very few women of domestic violence actually reach not court, but even, all the services that are provided to them, which includes the protection officer, which includes the protection officer, the shelter home, the one-stop centers that we were talking about, the police. There are so many agencies today created to address violence against women and children. And yet, very, very few women are approaching these agencies. When we talk about rape, it's very ironic because, Shalu ma'am spoke about 2 laws to address, rape and sexual violence on women and children. One is, of course, the IPC, where she narrated all the definitions of sexual violence. It's a very expanded scope. We talked about penovagina, penetration. We talked about penetration through other objects. So it's not only the old definition, which was a penovagina definition, that has been expanded to a very wide definition on penetrative sexual assault. We have molestation, we have voyeurism, we have sexual harassment. And then we have another very, very specific law that Shalu ma'am spoke about, which is the Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act. What she did not mention is that the Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act deals with, all kinds of sexual violence on children. And it is it is considered such a serious offense that it is sessions triable. So any law which is sessions triable means that it is an extremely, it's considered a heinous crime. And that is how serious the law thinks of when it comes to child sexual abuse. In fact, the law actually has added a section called mandatory reporting in child sexual offense. And the reason they have added that is because mostly it was a 10-year research that the government did before they brought this law, where they learned that child sexual offense is never reported. It is always put under the carpet because the accused is always a known person. I mean, how children don't go out. Children are not engaging with people outside. So it's usually the home or the school. And the neighborhood. And these are the places the sexual offense is happening. And so it's completely put under the carpet. Children's voices are muffled and they're not allowed to report. And hence we got this section, which I think is extremely important, that of mandatory reporting, which says that every citizen, you could be an NGO, you could be a doctor, you could be a police, you could be just a neighbor or a parent, you are mandated to report, and not reporting sexual violence is an offense. That's how serious this law is. And so in Bombay, before POCSO Act, we would get about 150, the Mumbai police would get about 150 cases of rape reported. And after the POCSO Act came, that number has increased to 700 cases per year. And that really goes to show, and that's the tip of the iceberg. I can tell you as a practitioner working on sexual violence, working on domestic violence, these cases are just the tip of the iceberg. Because if you have any resources, if you can, beat the system, if you can, not want to report, a lot of people are still continuing not to report sexual violence. So then I would like to come to this, this area that when and if women and children actually report, then what happens? And that is very important, because it's so beautiful when you sit in a classroom and you talk about, we have this law and we have that law and we have these services for women. The police is supposed to talk to you in plain clothes. There has to be help there. There has to be the one-stop center, immediately when the woman is facing violence, to be put into, a safe space. Protection officers should be there to support her, take her to court, ensure she gets her rights, give her other rehabilitation. But really what is happening on the ground is really sad. And I think that as academics, and especially you, Vibhuti ma'am, you have a loud voice who can really talk to people and talk to the governments to say what is going wrong. And I feel what is going wrong is exactly what is happening in society, right? That value system, that belief of the society continues to these stakeholders who are employed, whose full-time job is to protect women, but their starting point is to be, firstly, we do not believe women. Women are liars. They would have done something to do this. These are not genuine cases. Or why are you reporting? Your life will be spoiled. The same practices of society then get transferred to these agencies. And time and again, we have seen how when women approach police, actually the IPC says that on receipt of a cognizable offense, the police should record an FIR. It's that simple. If you can hear that this offense, what she's describing is a cognizable offense, record an FIR. But sadly, that is not what is happening at police stations. What is happening at police stations is almost a trial in the police station to decide whether they should record an FIR or not. There is a whole discussion about, if you file this case, your whole life will be spoiled. Or she having to prove absolutely, without any doubt that this has happened to her. And these are difficult things. It's a person who may be her friend, it may be her father. How do you prove it? And then she's made to wait long hours, almost, the whole system geared towards her not reporting. And then when we, we do a lot of training with police to explain to them their role, because continuously we are at one level asking that police should, follow the law and record an FIR. Women are coming with broken bones. Domestic violence victims are coming bleeding. They're coming telling you that the husband has raped them. The husband has, beat them, has not given them food for days. In your years, it is a cognizable offense. But with the support of a lot of other civil society organizations, including the women's movement is guilty of this, is we keep asking for counseling centers. And we keep asking police to form these counseling centers. So what is the police then doing? They are referring these cases to the counseling centers for settlement. We have names for them. We have Bharosa Cell, we have one-stop centers, we have police counselors. Everybody who's anybody is talking about how women should be sent for counseling. We have Supreme Court saying women should be sent for counseling. So don't women deserve the equality of the law that is available to all citizens? In any other crime, a police is supposed to record an FIR. But if it is a case of domestic violence, then suddenly the law doesn't apply to us because we are unequal citizens. We don't deserve the law. And the reasoning is given to save the family. For me, that is the most shocking term. We are failing women because of this sentence. Is it only on her back that we have to save the family? Is she responsible? And what is this belief that a man who has abused her, beaten her, tortured her to this level with your one counseling center of an untrained police officer who has no training in counseling or any other such services will talk to him and he will change overnight? Maybe we should use the same counselors for, people who are doing other crimes. if they are so good? And then we force women to go back to these homes, to these violent homes, claiming that we have 100% success. We have counseled all cases and all of them are now living happily ever after. Can we believe this statement? Can we support this statement? This is the reason women are dying in their home. If we have so many suicides, you are aware of how high, even in a city of Bombay, that women are committing suicide because of family violence, then we are all guilty of that because we have sent her back to those homes. She goes to the one-stop center. They are supposed to file an FIR. What do? They call the husband, they do counseling. She goes to the protection officer. Instead of filing her DIR, what do? They call her husband for counseling. It has become like a never-ending process of counseling, but nobody's allowing her to approach court. Nobody's creating that gateway and access to justice so that she can bring her problem to the court and the court can pass necessary orders that will give her her maintenance, that will give her a right to residence, that will give her a right to protect her from any violence. That for that she has to reach court. But all these agencies who we are promoting, they have cars, they have AC rooms, they are asking for increased salaries, and we are keeping on saying, let's have more of these officers. We are recommending more one-stop centers. We are recommending more protection officers to do more of this. And we need to question, we have to, the time has come for an accountability measure. What happened to these women? Where did they go? How are they today? Did they get their rights? And that is never done. We approach it by two ways. We'll say, we'll train police officers, we'll train everyone who's working. And what happens in these trainings? Everyone comes, they enjoy a one-day training, there's good food, there's lovely, you can fall asleep there, and then you go back and you do the same thing. How are we monitoring the training? Every single person is doing training. Police officers are trained, one-stop centers are trained, protection officers are trained, so much budget going into training. And what is that accountability? Where are those supposedly sensitized officers? Do we have an account of them? Do we know what they are doing? There is no tracking, monitoring of such services. Now, I cannot ignore, and I should not ignore, the fact is, then what happens when these cases come to court? So the few and far between cases that actually manage to reach court, what happens? And that for me is the travesty of justice, because in spite of all odds, because of the extent of the violence, because she can take it no more, these women's cases reach court. And when she reaches court, I'll separate the two because domestic violence is very different from rape. But if you take a victim of domestic violence who's approaching court, her case would be dealt with either in the family court or the magistrate court. The irony is that we are supposed to end a domestic violence trial in 60 days. And the fact is your first hearing date is given after 2 months. In a city like Bombay, we are getting dates once in 2 months. And you know that in a domestic violence case, the summons has to be served, the person has to appear, the person has to file his written statement, there has to be interim arguments, and only after that will she get her first order. But the reality is that domestic violence cases are being treated with the most disdain in the magistrate courts, because they also hear criminal cases, petty criminal cases, and for them, that is the priority. So domestic violence cases are relegated to afternoons or, just given very, very shadow treatment. And women have left their children, they have left their work, they have left their life, and they've come and sitting in court for justice. And firstly, the judges will be absent, or the husband will be absent, or the lawyer will be absent, or the woman may not be able. So as it is, the dates are postponed. But even when it is there, it almost seems that the judges are reluctant to give even a meager amount of maintenance to this woman. They ask 100,000 questions. She has to provide her assets and liabilities. He has to provide his assets and liabilities. That takes huge amount of time. And even after that, whatever she asks for, our experience is she gets 1/4. If at all she gets, when she finally gets. And after this long duration, I often want to ask this judge, where is your basic upholding of the Constitution, which is right to life? How is she supposed to survive? How is she supposed to eat? Is she supposed to beg on the road? Is the state supposed to provide her? We have a system of shelter homes that don't even allow women to live with their children. If she has a boy who's above 7 years, he will be put in another home. And no woman wants to live away from her children. So either she has to continue living in her husband's home, and in most cases, he may have thrown her out. Who are the judges thinking are supporting her? What are they imagining she's eating or her children are surviving? And it seems like they have no concern for this. We are recently actually doing a study on domestic violence cases, not so much court, but just talking to women to ask them how long it took to get a maintenance order. And the ones who got it, sometimes have got it after 4 years or 5 years. And if that is the level that judiciary, the highest epitome of where we want to reach to protect our rights, is going to respond, what hope do we have? And a lot of you will tell me that, okay, so you talked about how bad the judiciary is, so why should we go to the judiciary? And that's the question I get a lot, that you are saying, don't do counseling, go to the court. But this is how the court is behaving in passing orders. So then counseling seems like a better option, because you can, immediately shout at the guy or threaten him and send her back. But my question to all of you would be, can we write off a system that is built for the protection of women? And isn't it time that we demand their accountability, that we demand that they treat us with the same equality as every other citizen, have more courts if required, have more judges if required, hold up judges who are not passing orders on time, demand accountability for women, rather than say, courts are not working, let's look for an alternate justice system for women. I'll stop here. I'm sure you have lots of questions for me, but and before I stop, I want to tell you about sexual violence cases. So I remember when Majlis started our sexual violence program, we started about 10 years ago, little before the Nirbhaya case. And when we started because there was a victim, a 4-year-old victim in our neighborhood around our office, who was raped by a watchman in a school. And this is before the POCSO Act. We wanted to help her because she was a single woman. She was a migrant. Her husband had deserted her, so victim of domestic violence. Her child was first generation learner. And when her child was raped, and she went to the police station, of course, did not record the FIR, but called the trustees of the school, who badgered her and abused her, and all kinds of atrocious things that happened at the police station. And Majlis, we were not doing rape cases at that time. We were only doing civil domestic violence cases. We decided to take up the case and see, how we could help her. And that's when we saw the criminal justice system so close. We saw what happens at the police station. I remember, when we went to court, when she had to give her evidence, and we requested the sessions judge, Bombay, that as per the Sakshi guidelines, we didn't have POCSO, so we used the Sakshi guidelines, and we said the victim should not face the accused, and this is what you learn at law school, that, we have all these wonderful provisions. And the Sessions Court judge, which sits next to Bombay High Court, laughed in our face and said, oh, all these things are only possible maybe in High Court. We can't do all of this here. And all we did was just insist that the law be followed in true spirit, the law be followed as per what was provided to victims, all the services. And we didn't allow it to move forward. We would just say, no, our victim will not come. And we ensured they put cupboards at that time to, create a partition. And she deposed so well because there was a lot of support provided to the victim throughout the trial. And because of that, we got a 7-year conviction, which is unheard of because the school had hired, a very, very prominent defense lawyer. But what is interesting, and since then we have done almost 2,000 cases of rape over the last 10 years. So we work very closely with the system. The POCSO Act provides for a support person. So we work in the capacity of a support person. And, our role, even though we are lawyers, I think that this does not require a lawyer. You, me, everyone on this room can be a support person to a victim of rape. And all it requires is to be there, be with her and support her through that journey. And because we have education on our side, because we are literate, it's very easy for us to read the law and just say that, provide her this, or ensure she is brought to court on time, that she's brought in a dignified manner, that she's not badgered by the other side. We just have to ensure these processes. And I keep telling the police this, that though Majlis does not, our achievement is not determined by convictions or acquittals. We don't benchmark our work based on that, because that is the job of a judge. We benchmark our success on whether we have managed to, safeguard the dignity of this victim throughout the process. That for me is utterly important, because it should not be that she was raped twice. First by the accused and then by the system. And if we can, each one of us pledge to do that much, support any victim of rape through this process, that would be, that would ensure that we will make this justice system accountable. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for an enlightening and insightful session. Now I request the chair, Professor Vibhuti Patel, to share her remarks.
Thank you, Advocate Audrey for a very, very vivid presentation based on the first-hand experience and the heroic struggle which Majlis has waged against this most heinous crime of rape. And also your work on Manodhairya, I think that also you can share. I think I would also like to say that if we don't want emotional paralysis, that we also need to discuss some of the important best practices that your efforts have also created, and some of the progressive judgments also. Recently, we saw that housewife's work has been appreciated by the judge. And I think you also have on your trust board a judge who has given extremely progressive judgments in valuing women's work, or even cases of violence, gender-based violence. So I would like you to throw light on those things in your Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. The floor is now open for questions from the audience.
Madam Tanu is not going to speak. Is she going to speak? Tanu from Majlis.
They are my colleagues. Sushmi is here. Sushmi works with our domestic violence team. She does the legal consultation and advises. So I asked her to join, and Tanu is a young intern at Majlis. So I also requested her to join just to get an experience of what these sessions involve, and hopefully they will take the sessions in future.
Yeah, correct. Okay. So Q&A, yeah. Are there any questions? Please unmute yourself and ask.
There aren't any questions as of now.
So then I think Audrey can answer my questions about best practices in the systems at my.
So, Vibhuti ma'am brought up some very important points. I'll just throw light on one of the very important schemes that we must talk about, which is called the Manodhairya scheme. Actually, it's a national scheme. It's a victim compensation scheme. In Maharashtra, we call it the Manodhairya scheme. Victim compensation was, first discussed in a case which concerned the Delhi domestic workers. And the issue was that while the accused in a criminal trial would get punishment, conviction, acquittal, and thereafter punishment, what happens to the victim? Finally, she is the aggrieved party. Violence has been done on her. She has a loss of, whatever it is her loss. And where is she in this system? And it took long years of struggle by the women's movement and a lot of push, where we managed to then have the victim compensation scheme. The victim compensation scheme provides for victims of sexual violence, burning, acid attacks, to be provided a compensation. And it is a beneficial welfare scheme which talks about providing this compensation right in the beginning. It is not linked to the trial. It is not linked whether the accused gets conviction or acquittal, but it is to rehabilitate her life. So interim compensation is granted, should be granted within 7 days. Final compensation should be granted within 30 days. And the scheme now is in place in every state. I can share experiences from Mumbai because that's where I work. When we started in 2013, the scheme was allotting 2 to 3 lakhs to the victim, and with 30,000 as the interim compensation. It was then managed by the collector of the district. And when we drafted this Manodhairya scheme, we requested that the other stakeholders, which means the police, the medical, the prosecution, should be part of this committee, so that they know the cases that are coming on board and they are aware of what they need to do in the case or provide support. In 2017, a PIL was filed in the Bombay High Court saying that why should it be 2 to 3 lakhs, and it should be much higher. And it also challenged certain other things within the scheme. Finally, a new scheme, a revised scheme was drafted, where the compensation then went up to 10 lakhs. And but the sad part is it got transferred from the collector office into the DALSA office, which is the District Legal Aid Services, which means a judge is sitting in that committee and then the other members are there. Now, what happened because of that is judges have an inquiry mind, and wherever they sit, they think they have to pass judgment. So now what has happened is, while the compensation has increased to 10 lakhs, the judges firstly are wanting to verify whether this is the truth, this is not, why the medical is not indicating or the something, and they are just not granting compensation. We have a large pendency of cases today in Mumbai to grant Manodhairya. We constantly follow up with the DALSA on this issue, and either they complain they don't have funds because they are not a financial meant to look after finances, so they don't know the process. They have to ask the government. Government doesn't release funds on time. All of that issues at one level, but at another level, it has become a trial. And for me, that is the sad part. It was never meant to scrutinize whether this is a true case or a false case. All it asked for is that provide her support, provide her that compensation that will help her rebuild her life. So that is the Manodhairya scheme in Maharashtra. It's called the Victim Compensation Scheme nationally. And I think it's really, really important because this is the first time we put the victim in the center and did something for her. You also asked me about the recent judgment. I think that was an absolutely wonderful judgment and requires a lot of further discussion. So just to set context, in a matrimonial dispute and also in the case of divorce, we have a provision for maintenance. We have a provision for maintenance, and maintenance is decided depending on a couple of factors. One is, what is the capacity of the person to pay? Two is, what is the need of the victim? And whether, and it is only granted till the time, even in divorce, it's only granted till the time that she does not remarry. So this has a lot of conditions, right? Of course, maintenance is usually considered to be a monthly dole out. And it is a huge fight to kind of work out all these nuances. When women are granted maintenance, when husbands do not pay maintenance, it requires another case to enforce that maintenance, which is another long process. What this judge really spoke about was that women, by virtue, I mean, I know Vibhuti ma'am has spoken about it for decades, they are working in the house, and by providing that, because they provide at home, thus the family can go out and do what they do, whether children going to school, nurturing, caretaking, sick, all of that work is completely unpaid. Whereas at the same time, this man would use the resources of the household, go out and work, and then the earning is in his name. And so property is brought in his name, bank accounts are in his name, savings are in his name. And then when there is a divorce after 10 years, 15 years, the balance has completely tilted, with him having ownership of various assets and she having the children and nothing else, because she has left her job and she's doing this full time, and she has provided unrelentlessly 24/7. So how do you value that work? It cannot be valued primarily because, I remember after the judgment, people commenting that, oh, we'll hire a maid and then, it'll get done. But we all know that, it takes a whole love and affection and continuous effort to run a household. And that is what needs to be considered for compensation. So it's the perfect time to push for matrimonial property rights. We have inheritance rights from our parents. Women do not claim that, in spite of having that, because we fear that we will alienate our brothers, and hence we do not claim inheritance from our natal family. But I think the time has come for matrimonial property rights, division of property rights. People are recommending that this be done at the time of divorce. I recommend that this should be done at the end of every financial year. You file your returns, divide the assets, at least put it in her name, so that, when because it's always like this, right? When the love is good, that's the time he's giving. And when you are at war, how do you hope to get anything? So, because that's the time men will transfer their property to their, brothers or mothers or somebody, so that they can deny their property rights. So I think very, very important judgment, very appropriate time, because currently the government seems very pro gender justice. They're so pro gender justice that they want to bring in the Uniform Civil Code without understanding its nuances in the name of gender justice. So we should go to them and request them that don't give us Uniform Civil Code. Can you please give us just matrimonial property rights for women?
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. You can. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I had one question I earlier put forward to Shalu ma'am. So how do you think we should approach sex education in India from a legal point of view? Like, should it be mandated in primary schools?
Yeah, sure. Like, that is what the demand of all of us, like from the women's movement, that we should have that kind of education from the very beginning. Yeah, for the children, we have other schemes like, telling them about the good touch and bad touch. But as the child grows, like, we should talk about all this, because I remember, earlier when we in our biology, classes, we have this chapter on female and male reproduction, and that was never being taught in the classrooms. So that was, so this is the how the stereotype and the mindset was at that point of time. So we have covered a long distance, and but still we have to go long ahead and talk about these things openly. Like it should be very open kind of discussions within the and within every case, obviously, they're like some discussion forums, the things have been discussed and we are discussing, but we need more kind of discussions on this thing, because right now the discussion is being polarized. It's going in opposite directions, because people are talking about the background, the religious background, other kind of social backgrounds of the rapist and the victims, which we have seen in Katwa rape case, which we have seen in various other cases, which happened recently. So, and even in Hathras rape case, we have seen how the police has, immediately burned the body to destroy the evidence. These kind of things should be, discussed openly, which is not happening right now. Even the press people were, those who are going there to report about the Hathras incident, they have been jailed. So, these kind of things we need to discuss, and, because you're not following the law, even the law which is there on paper, why, the police has not followed that kind of law. This is what we need to discuss and debate. So ma'am, Vibhuti ma'am has said about, that Mangi case, but, there is now lines of such kind of cases. We're talking about the religion, which is a factor, the caste, which is a factor. So these kind of things, instead of having discussions and debating on these kind of issues, if we could discuss about the more positive, constructive aspect of law, the legal system, what is required to be done, I think that would be much beneficial for us. And to Audrey, it's very nice presentation, very good presentation. You have spoken, very nicely about, what are the things happening. But just one of the point I want to raise is that, the cases, as you said, the kind of problems women face. And then when the cases come even to the High Courts or Supreme Court, and the courts bluntly they say, oh, this law is being misused, the woman is telling a lie, she's a liar, and the whole justice, the point of justice is just broken at for a time. So you said about accountability of the system, so I really don't know how to talk about the accountability in these kind of cases where the women are being deprived of justice. So even their maintenance are being denied. The maintenance orders which may have been passed by the High Court or the Lower Court, and the judge in one sweeping statements, they say, oh, sabko arrest kar liya, like all the family members are being arrested, and all kind of things they say. So how to to go about that kind of situation?
I just wanted to also answer to the sex education. So currently it's not available in schools, right? Recently it was withdrawn, and sex education has not been permitted. So depending on the state, people are believing that girls and boys, they are going to go astray if we talk about sex. So we should not talk about sex. Also the kind of sex education, right? We say good touch, bad touch, or we say reproduction. The problem is that we're giving very mixed signals to girls, right? I remember being attracted to somebody as young as 12, 13, right? I have a child who, believes that they can go out and, it's okay. There's a lot of challenging that is happening in their own minds. So sexuality, firstly, we have to understand that at one level, we want to believe that nobody should have sex till marriage. That's the mindset. Good girls don't have sex till marriage. So when you're giving sex education, if you're giving with that perspective, then what happens to girls? Because it's not like they're not having sex. It's just that they're having unsafe sex, and then they're not coming to you because they're too scared. I am handling cases after case of minor girls. They are 13, they are 14, they are 6 months, 7 months pregnant. They have kept it away from everyone because they were too scared to confide. And because of that, now I have to go to High Court and get MTP granted by the permission of High Court, which then becomes very late and a threat to their life. So we need to first clear our mindset about what we believe in sexuality. Unless we have an open discussion about that, any other sex education will be fruitless, because we are putting a seed in their head that what you are doing is wrong. It's bad. But how can we state something that they are exploring and they are, experimenting? How do we first have the discussion about what is sexuality? What are their bodies? What is happening to their bodies? Why the attraction? And firstly sanction that, and then you can teach them how to use a condom, how to be safe. It's not about restricting them.
Provided they have say in the man-woman relationship. So
That's another matter, but how will they have say?
decision-making power, even married women don't have. So even these young girls, right from what they have to wear and what hairstyle to have and with whom to talk and or which mobile numbers to keep, everything is controlled by boyfriend. So to what extent, even if she knows that it is going to, she will get pregnant, does she have a say in the relationship? So I think empowerment of girls, self-esteem building, equally important. In fact, in Bacha, when we do, we don't call it, we call it a personality development. That whole module is called personality development. Focus is on managing the power relation, dignity, bodily integrity, and knowing about the anatomy. So that's how it's an ideological change, being assertive in your personality.
Thank you, ma'am. So moving forward, we have the last session for the day by Dr. Kaustuv Bandyopadhyay, who will be taking a session on the topic Civil Society, Laws, Public Policies and Impact. Dr. Kaustuv Bandyopadhyay is the Director of Society for Participatory Research in Asia, based in New Delhi, and PRIA International Academy. Welcome, sir, and over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nikita. If that is your name, what is written, I'm sort of
Yes,
articulating that only. Thank you so much. It's a honor and privilege to be part of this program. And good afternoon to everyone, including Professor Patel. It's nice to be with you in this panel. So I was sort of advised by my dear friend Arjun to talk about civil society in the context of public policies and role of civil society. So if one of you could give me a little bit of, maybe a very brief sort of intro about this program and the participants, who are they, and that would help me to situate my presentation as well.
We will do that.
Arjun, would you be able to do that?
Professor Patel will suggest, ma'am, if you can just suggest, sir, for a recap. Yes.
You mean you're telling me? Hello?
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I think the participants are basically working at a community level in community-based organizations, non-government organizations, in academia. They are researchers, and some of them are legal activists, and by being part of different social movements. No? So that has been the overall background. So they are familiar with the grassroots reality, and now the capacity building in terms of laws and policy, public policy making, that is done. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. That's very helpful. One must know who am I talking to. So that introduction was helpful. So what I have done here, I have put together a couple of slides. Hopefully, this will cover the expectation from different participants. And the topic that I have chosen to talk about is role of civil society in inclusive development and democratic governance, trajectories and future. And I'll mostly talk in the context of India, but occasionally we may also refer to the role of civil society, the kind of role that they have been playing regionally and globally. Just before that, I wanted to give and take this opportunity to introduce participatory research in Asia. Participatory research in Asia is based in New Delhi, and it was established in 1982. And since its inception, our focus has been to promote participation. And over the last 4 decades, PRIA has taken many initiatives along with other civil society organizations in India and elsewhere to promote participation in development, participation in democracy, participation in democratic governance. Incidentally, last year we celebrated our 40th anniversary. In fact, 2 years back, we celebrated our 40th anniversary, and the organization has recommitted to the issue of participation. And we have been promoting participation based on the assumption that we need to reassert citizens' popular knowledge as the basis for their participation. And we have been putting together a strong coalition of civil society organizations, local governance institutions, both in rural and urban areas, to mainstream participation in the decision-making process at the local level. In addition, while we continue to promote participation, we have been working with a range of civil society groups and providing them training, capacity building support, and in a way sort of helping them to be future ready and to confront the emerging challenges that they might face in contributing to the society. As I mentioned, that we also work quite actively in promoting sustainable urbanization and the challenges that a country like India faces, which half of the city is under the informality, both in a habitational terms and also in economic term. So acknowledging the informality in the urban planning process, urban governance process, and to support that informality to be mainstream within the city decision-making process through scaling up of citizen engagement, workers' engagement is very much central to our work. And with the emerging climate challenges, it's equally important to look at how particularly the marginalized group adapt to the impact of climate change in the cities. And we do work with the elected representatives, mayors, as well as with other tier of governance institutions, particularly the state government and the national government. We have another thing called knowledge democracy, where we are closely partnering with many higher education institutions, universities, to promote participatory research, both in terms of in production of knowledge, but also in teaching the new generation in those academic institutions. And gender is a cross-cutting theme for PRIA's work, and we have been promoting women leadership both at the local level, within the civil society organizations, within the local governance institutions, and helping organizations to integrate gender in a seamless manner, which means looking at the organization's objectives, structures, decision-making, and how gender can be respected, and gender equality can be respected, and in the sort of decision-making, how women can be taking meaningful part. So that's about PRIA. I thought that taking this opportunity to tell about tell you about our organization. So let me start with the first question. And would it be possible to interact with the participants, or should I do it through chat box, or they can talk as well?
No, so people will raise hands.
Okay.
Raise hands
Okay.
if anyone have. So we'll make it interactive, no issues.
Okay. So I just wanted to get a sense from all of you that when we say civil society, first of all, what does come to your mind? What is civil society? Who is civil society? And when did you hear civil society, the phrase civil society first, and where? So what is civil society? When did you hear it, and where did you hear it? Anyone?
Okay. Dikshita, yeah, please go on. Dikshita? Kumari Dikshita ji, go on.
Okay, am I audible?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So, sir, according to me, a civil society is a non-profit voluntary citizens group which may be organized at the local, national, or the international level, working for a particular subject or in a particular area.
Excellent. Excellent. Any other thoughts?
जमीला जी, आप हिंदी में बोल सकती हैं, बोलना चाहेंगी? हेलो, आप हैं?
Yes, Jamila ji.
हेलो, आप अनम्यूट करके बोल सकती हैं. She is muted. Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, sir, please go ahead. Yeah.
Okay.
Connection.
So, I mean, the response from Dikshita was very apt in a sense that when we say civil society, first of all, it's association of people. And the very concept of civil society make a distinction that it's non-political and non-economic. When we say non-profit, it refers to the market, which means that the other organizations in the market, their objective is to make profit, create wealth. Whereas civil society's objective is more on the public good side, not necessarily economic profit, but other social profit. And it's a non-political in the sense that although when we say civil society, it has a reference to the state, but it does not participate directly in the partisan political process. So that makes a distinction between what is civil society and what is political society and what is economic society. So the way we sort of define civil society is to acknowledge that it's a sum of individual and collective initiatives directed towards the pursuit of common public good. One thing that we must acknowledge here is that it's not only, although we refer to civil society as association of people, but we must acknowledge the individual initiatives and the collective initiatives, both in the traditional sense and in the contemporary sense. So in the traditional sense means how the society was structured, in our earlier days, and the sort of inclusion of modernity in the society both refers to civil society. But the expression civil society gained momentum only in the last 40, 50 years. When we say the initiatives directed towards the pursuit of common public good, here is an understanding that producing public good is not an exclusive domain of the state or market, and therefore civil society can contribute. Civil society has been contributing to creating public good and defining what is public good. But many a times, if you add a kind of positive elements to civil society definition, it often defines public good from the vantage point of the marginalized. And the point that Dikshita, you mentioned about causes, these are mostly related to the causes related to the marginalized groups. So that's the way one can conceptualize what is civil society, and this is a kind of generic definition, not only in Indian context but also in other developing countries or developed countries context. So you can say it's a kind of global understanding of what is civil society.
Yeah, Jamila ji has raised hand.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, please.
जमीला जी बोलिए. मुझे स्पीकर से फ्री करो. प्लीज अलाउ हर टू स्पीक. हेलो, IMPRI team, please unmute her.
Yes, ma'am. She can unmute herself. There is an option.
हाँ, बोलिए. हेलो,
हाँ जमील जी बोलिए.
आपको अनम्यूट किया है. जमीला जी बोलिए, आप खुद कर लीजिए. प्लीज स्पीक. हेलो, जमीला जी आप हैं? हाँ बोलिए.
Jamila ji, you can unmute yourself.
आप अनम्यूट कर लीजिए अपनी ओर से और बोलिए. हेलो.
मैम
नहीं हो रहा.
नहीं हो रहा उनसे. बट मैम आफ्टर प्रेजेंटेशन हम आ जाएंगे फिर से.
ठीक है, तब. हाँ,
तो
ऑप्शन नहीं है, ऑप्शन नहीं आ रहा है. शी हैज रिटन.
ओके,
अनम्यूट का ऑप्शन नहीं आ रहा है. ठीक है.
इट शुड कम. जमीला जी आप वापस से लॉग आउट करके लॉग इन करके देख लीजिए एक बार.
हाँ, तब तक. ओके, ठीक है.
Please go ahead, Kaustuv. Yeah.
Thank you. So, I mean, while we think civil society in a positive way, but there are sort of problematics in defining civil society. First of all, not necessarily all associations of people produce public good, which could be claimed as public good universally. And therefore, civil society might not be always virtuous. There could be, some authors, some scholars have termed this like uncivil part of the civil society. So many a times we see sort of elements within our society, collective elements within our society, which might be very narrowly focused and does not necessarily contribute to welfare and public good of everyone. And then second is public good. In the definition of public good is not uncontested. Every group will define public good from their vantage point, from their interest point. And therefore, here comes the question of the democratic elements within the civil society, that the public good needs to be negotiated with different groups that exist within the space available to the civil society. And of late, the boundary between civil society and market and civil society and state are increasingly getting blurred. Just to give you one example, the self-help groups or microcredit. The purpose of these self-help groups or microcredit groups is to produce economic benefit. Now, when we say civil society is a non-profit organization or non-profit entity, then it blurs the question of making profit for the group, but at the same time producing public good, which is sort of social in nature. Similarly, civil society's participation in state building or influencing the politics many a times is seen as sort of many people or many groups see it as a kind of transgression from or blurring of the boundaries between the political society and the civil society. So, but at the end of the day, we live with the definition that it's the individual and collective initiatives for producing public good, common public good. If you look at the civil society types in India, first of all, civil society is not a new entity in the Indian society. It has existed before, but perhaps, in the past, 20, 30, 40 years back, we didn't sort of, often refer to those entities as civil society. We sort of call them traditional associations. Traditional associations could be in many tribal societies. You have many traditional associations. Even in different religious, spiritual groups, you get traditional associations. Similarly, if you look at various religious associations, they also come under the purview of civil society. Then a kind of third category of civil society is around social movements. And when I say social movements, many a times social movements are protest movement, but also advancing the needs and interest of a particular group. This could be an environmental group. This could be a kind of Dalit group, or this could be a minority group. And each group wants to pursue their interest within the sphere of civil society through social movement. In the past, we have seen so many movements against the displacement caused by the modern day development, whether it is displacement due to dam construction or displacement due to road construction, displacement due to constructing other modes of transportation. But then people got together and protested against those decisions. Those are also part of civil society. And as I was mentioning, that movement for protection and preservation or conservation of the environment, whether it is conservation of forest, conservation of water, conservation of land. There have been historical movements which also falls under the gamut of civil society. And then you see the movements to improve the governance, improve state accountability, and demanding for better governance, good governance, and demanding accountability from the states, also part of the social movement, and therefore it becomes part of the sphere in civil society. Then you look at different membership associations. Some are representational association or professional association. In your university, you might see the Association of Professors. That's a civil society. You may find lawyers association. You may find doctors association. We say Indian Medical Association. It's a civil society organization. You may see, the profit-making organizations making membership association. Let's say FICCI or CII. Each individual organization is a for-profit organization, but the association that they constitute or build, that advances the interest of those organizations or of that group, and therefore it also comes under civil society. Then self-help. Many times, communities come together and they self-help themselves, and those are also type of civil society. And there are social cultural association. There's so many spiritual groups which are also membership association. And when I say membership-based association, then there is a clear distinction between who is member and who is not member. And the members, they sort of, through their own internal mechanism, they decide about what kind of interest they want to pursue through their association. And then we have the intermediary civil society organizations. We often, used to refer to these organizations as non-governmental organizations or voluntary organizations. And these are intermediary in a sense. They are intermediating between community and the state, community and other institutions. And there could be service delivery types, those organizations which are providing certain services to the community. This could be mobilizational. Many civil society organizations are involved in mobilization of community to pursue some public good. There could be support organizations like PRIA. It provides training support, capacity building support to other civil society organizations, but we are intermediary in nature. There could be philanthropic organization. These are like many private foundations. They are intermediary types. They mobilize resources to produce public good for the community. Those are philanthropic organizations. Some organizations are involved in advocacy, whether it is policy change or implementation of a particular policy. And then you might have a network of civil society organizations. For example, in India, we have Voluntary Action Network India. You have many sectoral network organizations working on the issues of water and sanitation, organizations working on the issues of education. They may also form several types of networks. So these are intermediary types of organizations that we see within the civil society sphere. So what I was trying to tell here is that it won't be wise to in a way synonymize NGOs with the civil society. When we say civil society, it's a much broader spectrum, and a variety of organizations constitute the space occupied by the civil society. And as I mentioned, that there are traditional associations, there are religious associations, there are membership-based organizations, there are membership-based associations, and then the intermediary types, which a large part is occupied by so-called non-governmental organizations. So when we say when we refer to civil society, it's a much broader concept than only the intermediary civil society, intermediary non-governmental organization. Now, what role does civil society play? And these roles have been playing by the civil society and a variety of organizations that we just talked about. First of all, it's a service provisioning role. Despite the fact that this massive economic growth, massive investment in public programs, there are still groups which are marginalized, which are excluded, which are unreached. This could be tribal, Dalits, minorities, could be economically disadvantaged group who might not have access to health services, education services, or other, let's say, if they are dependent on agriculture and they require agricultural input in terms of, finance, in terms of their other, let's say, implements. Many times, civil society organizations provide those services to those excluded and unreached communities. and it has been a kind of one of the most traditional role that civil society has been playing in India and elsewhere. So basically, it's helping the poor by providing certain services that they lack at this moment. And the second role is promoting and scaling up innovations in participatory development practices. To my mind, this is one of the most crucial role that civil society has played over decades. And if you look at the range of innovations that civil society organizations have been able to pursue, and many of those innovations later on picked up by the government for scaling it up, whether it is in the areas of water management, whether it is in the areas of forest management, whether it is in the areas of sanitation. Civil society organizations have enormous ability to produce local solutions in an innovative way. And if it works in one locations, then many organizations have advocated with the government, because government has large resource at their disposal. But many times government lacks ideas that how a particular problem can be solved. So civil society organizations have produced evidence that how an existing policy or existing program could be better leveraged through these social innovations. And the role of the government there was to make further investment to scale up those innovations so that a larger number of people and community can be benefited from those innovations. Then the third role that civil society organizations have been playing is promoting economic and political empowerment of the marginalized through mobilization and awareness building. And I think again, we might not give sufficient emphasis, but one of the critical roles that civil society organizations have been playing is building awareness, providing knowledge, support to the community. Many times, many government programs are not known by the community. They might be unaware about that, what are their rights, what are their entitlements, what kind of facilities they might get from the public programs, or other information which could be beneficial to support their life and livelihood. A large part of civil society organizations have been providing this information support to the community, and therefore contributing towards building awareness of the society and in the society. And in addition to that, they have been promoting economic empowerment. Let's say, self-help groups or supporting the farmers producer organizations, or supporting the workers or laborers, and helping them to consolidate their economic gain. And this role has been played by the civil society organizations. And I also include political empowerment, because political empowerment not in terms of participating in the political processes, but also participating in the local decision-making processes. And therefore, the previous session was talking about gender and sexuality. So it's when women can exert their rights, it not only requires economic empowerment, but it also requires political empowerment, which means influencing the way society thinks, changing the ways we challenging those stereotypes. Those are included under the political empowerment. And many times the political empowerment comes through mobilization and awareness building. And this role has been played by the civil society organizations for a long time. Then promoting active citizenship and access to rights and entitlements. You see and this is also linked to the third point that we mentioned about mobilization and awareness building. Making oneself aware about, providing information to the tribal communities, Adivasi communities, that what are their rights, what are their rights regarding forest, what are their customary rights regarding their natural resources. All those rights are, first of all, to be known by the community. And if they don't know about this, if they are not aware about that, those rights will only be staying on paper, and that will never be actualized by the intended community. And therefore, promoting active citizenship means that exercising rights and also talking about the responsibilities as citizens. And if you look at various movements, right to information movement, right to education movement, all these have created a large number of active citizenship across the country. And this role has been played by the Indian civil society organizations quite efficiently. Then supporting governance reforms and democracy building with a bottom-up approach. Of course, the political process is critical. Partisan politics is critical to maintain the quality of democracy. But political education of the citizens is equally important in terms of exercising the political rights and building a democratic society. And building a democratic society not by a kind of top-down approach, but through a bottom-up approach. Years after years, civil society organizations, through mobilization of communities, through awareness raising, they have been building this movement at the local level. And supporting the governance reform means many a times there are institutions, there are policies in place, but those might not be sufficient to address the contemporary problems. And therefore, through innovative approaches, if you look at the kind of civil society organizations which have been promoting Manrega, supporting the implementation of Manrega, or bringing or advocating for changes in the policies, changes in the procedures, changes in the institutional setup. All these have been contributed by the civil society organizations. And this has created an interface between the policy-making institutions, the state, as well as the civil society. So it's a kind of intermediation function that civil society has been playing. And this is linked to the my last point, that promoting policy discourse on public good. So whether it's access to water, whether it is access to sanitation, whether it is access to roads, access to safety, all these are public goods, right? And in order to make them affordable, accessible to large part of the community, and those part of the communities especially who often get marginalized and excluded, how policies can be shaped and influenced to accelerate access to those public goods, whether it is water, whether it's education, whether it is health services, all these are public goods. So having said these, what challenges does civil society face today? One is a kind of contradictory sort of phenomena here. While the role of civil society is heavily acknowledged by the state, by the market, by the society in general, but there is also all forms of repression to curtail the voice of the civil society. And this has become almost like a two sides of the same coin. You get recognition, but you also get separation by the powerful forces, particularly when you critique any public policy or some governmental decisions. then state also provide or also impose restrictions on the functioning and the space for civil society. The second is that on many occasions, on numerous occasions, in fact, civil society and government both have collaborated with each other and in producing or providing certain services or implementing certain programs in a much better manner. But there is also a dilemma that whether civil society becomes an extension of the state, or one of the functions that we mentioned about civil society, or one of the roles that civil society has been playing, is holding the state institutions accountable. And therefore, you can hold institutions accountable only through monitoring their performance, their conduct, whether they are following the ethics of the governance or not. And therefore, many times there is a dilemma within the civil society that and the ways other actors see or perceive civil society as implementing agency, as opposed to the role of performance monitoring of the state institutions, or for that matter, even market institutions, how far they are ethically implementing their programs, and how ethically is their profit-making venture. So those are critical dilemma. Then civil society and political society relationship. We often see constructive engagement, but we also see the hostility between civil society and the political parties in this, to be very specific, and therefore, and this has perhaps because the constituency of civil society and constituency of the political society are the same. That both are trying to influence the community in two different ways, and for two perhaps different purposes, and therefore some constructive understanding and constructive engagement perhaps would produce better outcome at the community level. Then the fourth challenge for civil society organizations today is diminishing resources. And this is particularly coming both internationally and nationally. A lot of civil society organizations have been successful in mobilizing global international resources to pursue their mission or pursue their work, pursue their causes. But with the sort of economic growth or perceived economic growth within the country, many times the international community think that civil society could mobilize domestic resources. Whereas the national government occasionally has also imposed restriction in mobilizing resources for the civil society work. So while civil society has a lot to do, but the resources which are required to do that work is diminishing to a large extent. And then one of the challenges is solidarity with the humanity, both in the domestic front and in the international front. The point that I'm trying to make here is that, with the kind of economic growth that and the kind of global recognition that India has received in the past 10-15 years, and unlike northern countries, India is also providing resources and technology and capacity building support to other developing countries. If you look at the cooperation between Bangladesh, India, if you see cooperation between Afghanistan, India, if you see cooperation between Myanmar or other Southeast Asian countries, India has been providing support within the framework which is often referred as South-South cooperation framework, which means the countries from the southern global south cooperating with another global south, another country from the global south. This is referred to as South-South cooperation. While we see this cooperation between state to state, but civil society organizations, particularly a few very prominent civil society organizations, have also been cooperating with other civil society organizations in those developing countries. And therefore, certain laws and policies are not, in a sense, conducive to this kind of international cooperation by the Indian civil society with other civil society organizations from the developing countries. And therefore, we need to sort of take a look at what kind of policies could enable the Indian civil society organizations to provide those support to other civil society organizations. So just to conclude, what are the future tasks for civil society? One is, of course, protecting and advancing the democratic space that was available to civil society, to continue to expand that space where civil society can contribute to build a just society, a much more equal society. That's the ultimate objective of civil society. Then strengthening new and old coalition. We continue to build relationship with other civil society, not only within the civil society, but also new relationship with the, let's say, philanthropic community, with the market institutions, with the state institutions. So we need newer coalition building in order to address many developmental challenges or challenges faced by the democracy and the democratic governance. We need to find a solution to that, and then mobilizing new resources for civil society. As we mentioned, that with the diminishing resources, it's increasingly becoming difficult for civil society to contribute or continue to contribute towards the society. And therefore, finding new sources from here, these resources can be mobilized. And engaging with new and old intergovernmental arrangements like the one that is happening right now in India. Let's say G20. It's a kind of intergovernmental entity. Or people have been talking about BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. So these are formations, including the UN agencies. And therefore, how do we continue to engage with these intergovernmental agencies? Because many times, many national policies and priorities are determined by these intergovernmental agencies. And therefore, influencing their policy would ultimately also influence the national policies and priorities in favor of the most marginalized groups, and making development and democracy more inclusive. So these are sort of, there are many tasks before civil society organizations, but these are most critical tasks that we see for the future of civil society. Let me stop here and see if there are questions, comments from our colleagues.
We have a few questions in the Q&A box, so should I read it out?
Okay, let me see what are those.
I'll request Mohammed Ji to unmute himself and ask.
Yeah, would it be possible to ask the question?
Yes, and Mohammed Ji is joining us from Pakistan. Yeah.
I see.
Mohammed Ji, please go ahead. You can unmute and ask us.
Okay, yeah, so I'm going to ask my first question. So around the literature with respect to how civil societies work and operate, we have a lot of laws in place that usually restrict foreign funding. Foreign funding to these civil society organizations, to any other organizations, think tanks that play a part. But there's certain concerns about the external interference within another society, and so restrictions have been placed. So my question is, are such restrictions necessary to safeguard national interest, or do they hinder the global collaboration and exchange of ideas necessary for civil society to thrive?
Well, this concern or perception is not new. This has been going on for last several decades. You know, the time when international organizations started supporting the local NGOs, local civil society organizations. Time and again, the government has expressed their doubts and they wanted to be cautious. While governments had the huge apparatus to filter that, you know, if you are registered in as to receive the foreign contribution, you know, if you have a registration on FCR, in our case, in Indian case, I think there is sort of similar law in Pakistan as well, restricting access to foreign resources. So you have the details of those NGOs, right? Now, it's a lazy way to, restrict funding to the civil society organizations on part of the government. If they can use their apparatus, if they can use their policies and rules, the uncivil elements will not be able to access those resources. So, and there is also, you know, different causes. You know, if the government becomes only about civil society organizations advocating certain issues or advocating for certain issues or certain groups, in a democracy that is that should be acceptable, but within a kind of, you know, framework. Within a framework, a framework will always pose some restrictions, but some reasonable restrictions can be understood and appreciated. But when a blanket suspicion, and it has become a kind of, you know, political tool to paint the civil society organizations in one brush and say that these are anti-national or involved in international work. Anything, any civil society organization which would sort of make any critique of the government or any other forces, to call them anti-national is not a kind of way out, to be very frank. So just to sort of straightforward answer your question, that reasonable restriction is okay, but unreasonable and lazy way of doing things or doing business is extremely unwelcome. Shweta.
Yes, sir. But there is another question by Mohammed, sir.
Okay, can you just read it? Yeah.
Sir, could you unmute Mohammed, sir?
You can read it out, Shweta.
Sure. Sure. But the thing is that that question is somewhat answered from within the presentation that is shown. I do have another question that I will ask nonetheless. I'm just writing it. Just give me 1 second for everyone to see as well. I was just finishing writing it. So this is the concern that generally is associated with any civil society or their functioning. The concern is therefore is as follows. The civil society sector can be fragmented with numerous organizations working on similar causes or overlapping issues. This is a widespread issue that exists not only in countries like Pakistan, but generally over the course of the Western society as well. This fragmentation can result in duplication of efforts, competition for resources, and difficulty in achieving collective impact or collaboration. I think this is the single most grave hindrance to how they have to function. How do you think civil societies can proceed from this point onwards to eliminate this concern?
You see, I mean, if you look at the behavior of the private sector before the national budget process, okay, and within the same industry, there's a huge competition, right? Who would take the greatest share of the market. So competition is there. But when it comes to pursue the interest of that particular sector, the IT industry or the manufacturing industry, they will come together and lobby and advocate with the government for that sector. That parallel can also be in the civil society, that there could be cooperation for creating larger space for the civil society, but homogenization of civil society might not be a good idea. And given the fact that what we tried to sort of explain in the first part of the presentation, that it's not only the non-governmental intermediary types, but also there is a range of entities within the civil society spectrum. And therefore, each one might pursue a specific interest. And if you want to sort of, bring all the interests together, and then you would lose the essential meaning of the civil society, because diversity is an asset within the civil society, and therefore we don't want to see all organizations look alike, and therefore that nurturing the diversity is required. But that does not mean that we cannot cooperate. For similar causes or for larger causes, civil society can always come together, and this has been going on. But you are absolutely right that when the resources are limited, there is more competition to access those resources, and therefore it also sort of, in a way, influence the nature and the intensity of the cooperation. So it's a kind of fine balance that the civil society organizations need to play. But at the same time, there could be contradictory interests within civil society, and this contradiction might come from the inspiration that you draw on in defining the problem or the development perspective with which you work. There is a kind of contradictory perspective between service providing organizations and an advocacy organization, because advocates would sort of try to fix the policy and hold the state accountable to deliver, whereas other civil society organizations are delivering the same good which state is supposed to be delivering. So there could be contradiction, but this could also be converted into a complementarity, that certain groups might not be able to wait for advocacy to fructify, but then you also need direct support. Certain communities would need direct support. So that working equation, equation for cooperation, need to be sorted out within the civil society. But an externally imposed framework to cooperate might not work and might not be desirable.
So I have a question. I mean, I had this doubt. I always had this doubt back of my head that as to how do civil society organizations raise funds and sustain their operations. So I'm specifically interested in understanding the different sources, like the long-term sources that they would seek to boost their funds. I always had these doubts.
Well, I mean, now that many civil society organizations, with this introduction of 2% mandatory contribution of the corporate social responsibility, there's a chunk of resource available to the civil society organization, or should be available to the civil society organization, I must say. Then there are philanthropic organizations which can contribute and which are contributing to as their goal. But remember that while sort of philanthropy has been ingrained in our society for so long, I mean, since it's very much sort of integrated within our society, philanthropic giving, spiritual giving, your religious giving, people donating money or feeding people. Those are very much philanthropy as well. But the modern day philanthropy is sort of nascent in that sense in India, and CSR is also quite nascent in India. So these are kind of domestic sources, but many civil society organizations are also becoming social entrepreneurs. So it means that they are in a way interfacing with the market and trying to take advantage of the market economy in producing social good or public good. And they are not dependent on donation per se, but they create a business model through which they can sustain their operations. So there's sort of multiple, and so far, a good part of resources came from international organizations as part of the International Development Cooperation. So what we are referring to as foreign funding. I hope I answered your question.
Yes.
May I ask one question, please?
Sure.
Yeah, मेरा एक सवाल है।
जी बोलिए।
हम सिविल सोसाइटी की बात करते हैं और कम्युनिटी में काम करने वाली जो बात करते हैं, आज से पिछले 10 साल या 12 साल पहले एक रास्ता था सिविल सोसाइटियों को काम करने का और एक फंड मिलता था उनको कहीं से भी। आज के डेट में ऐसा है कि सिविल सोसाइटी अगर काम करना चाहती है कम्युनिटी के अंदर लोकल लोगों की डेवलपमेंट के लिए, लेकिन बहुत सारे ऐसे सरकारी इंस्ट्रक्शंस होते हैं जहाँ पे हर महीना उन लोगों को कोई ना कोई फॉर्म भर के देना पड़ता है या फिर कोई ना कोई हिसाब उनको देना पड़ रहा है। तो वहाँ पे हम CSR भी नहीं हासिल कर पा रहे हैं, ना कोई फंड हासिल कर पा रहे हैं, ना कोई बाहर देश का फंड ले पा रहे हैं। तो ऐसे सिचुएशंस के अंदर हम सिविल सोसाइटीज कैसे काम करे, CBOs कैसे काम करे, क्या इसके लिए कोई रास्ते हो सकते हैं क्या? आज के डेट में बहुत डिफिकल्ट हो गया है काम करना।
वो अंग्रेजी में बोलते हैं ना $1 million क्वेश्चन, ये $1 million
चलेगा
क्वेश्चन
चलेगा
है
चलेगा चलेगा।
नहीं, मैं ये कह
जी।
रहा हूँ कि आपने बहुत ही उम्दा सवाल किए हैं और ये बहुत ही पर्टिनेंट है आज के तारीख में सिविल सोसाइटी ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस के लिए। जो बात हो रहा था कि अननेसेसरी कुछ रेस्ट्रिक्शंस सिविल सोसाइटी की फंक्शनिंग के ऊपर आ गया है, जो मैं अननेसेसरी इसलिए बोल रहा हूँ कि उसके बिना भी सरकार सिविल सोसाइटी के ऊपर निगरानी कर सकते थे, उसकी जरूरत नहीं पड़ता। पर मेरे ख्याल में थोड़ा क्रिएटिविटी कम हो गई है कि कैसे सिविल सोसाइटी ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस को सपोर्ट किया जाए। उस ढंग से जो आप फॉर्म की बात कर रहे हैं, रजिस्ट्रेशन की बात कर रहे हैं, ये एक ढंग से मोर रिस्ट्रिक्शंस ही है सिविल सोसाइटी के ऊपर। जहाँ तक रिसोर्स की सवाल है, जैसे स्वाति जी का सवाल था, श्वेता का सवाल था कि कहाँ से रिसोर्सेस आ सकते हैं। ये कॉर्पोरेट सोशल रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी प्रोग्राम से रिसोर्स आ सकता है, फिलैंथ्रोपिक जो प्राइवेट फाउंडेशंस हैं वहां से रिसोर्स आ सकता है। पर जिस कम्युनिटी के साथ हम काम कर रहे हैं उस कम्युनिटी भी उस कम्युनिटी के इर्द गिर्द जो कम्युनिटी है जो थोड़ा सा बेटर ऑफ है, वो भी कंट्रीब्यूट कर सकते हैं। तो लोकल रिसोर्स मोबिलाइजेशंस का भी एक गुंजाइश है। तो हमें भी थोड़ा सा क्रिएटिव होना पड़ेगा। हम ये नहीं कह सकते कि कोई आके पैसा देंगे उसके बाद ही काम करेंगे। सवाल तो हमने खड़ा किया तो उत्तर तो हमें ढूंढना पड़ेगा।
हाँ सर, और एक मेरा एक सवाल था। आपने कहा कि एसोसिएशंस बहुत सारे बनते जा रहे हैं। एसोसिएशन बनने के पीछे का सबसे बड़ा कारण हम जब कम्युनिटी के अंदर काम करते हैं, हम सरकार के अंदर जाकर काम करते हैं, तो हमें ये दिखता है कि इनसिक्योरिटी हर कम्युनिटी के लिए, हर कास्ट पर्टिकुलर कास्ट के लिए या हर कोई एक सोच रखने वाले लोगों के लिए इनसिक्योरिटी फील हो रहा है। तभी तो वो अलग अलग एसोसिएशंस बनाने के पीछे पड़े हुए हैं। क्या हम ऐसे लोगों के लिए क्या कर सकते हैं जो अलग अलग एसोसिएशन बनाने के पीछे जा रहे हैं, उनको क्या हम एक जगह पे एक कम्युनिटी में ला नहीं सकते हैं, या लाने के लिए इसके लिए कोई ऐसे उपाय हैं जिनको हम इस्तेमाल करके हम लोकल कम्युनिटी के अंदर कम से कम लोगों को एकत्रित ला सके, सभी समाज सभी सोच वालों को एक प्लेटफॉर्म दे सके।
देखिए कि एसोसिएशन का मतलब ये है कि कलेक्टिव बनाना, ठीक है ना। तो जहां आपको जो एग्जिस्टिंग पावर रिलेशनशिप है उसको चैलेंज करना होगा, तो मोबिलाइजेशन कलेक्टिवाइजेशन एक जरिया बनता है, एक रणनीति बनती है कि जिसके तहत हम उस पावर इक्वेशन को चैलेंज कर सकते हैं। तो जितना बड़ा मोबिलाइजेशन हम कर सकते हैं, जितना बड़ा संगठन हम बना सकते हैं जो कि लोगों की द्वारा बनाई गई हैं और लोगों की हित में काम कर रहे हैं, और उसमें भी एक डेमोक्रेटिक प्रक्रिया के तहत वहां से लीडरशिप निकल कर आए, उनकी डिसीजन मेकिंग में एक डेमोक्रेटिक प्रोसेस रहे। इसको अगर हम तंदुरुस्त कर सकते हैं तो उम्मीद है। और हमारे आप इतिहास में भी देखिए ना कि जितने सारे सोशल मूवमेंट्स हुए हैं वो तो लोगों के द्वारा किया गया है। तो उन्होंने बड़े से बड़े पॉलिसी को चेंज करने में मदद किया है। तो एक नई मूवमेंट्स खड़ा करने की जरूरत है, और नई मूवमेंट्स कोई स्क्रैच से शुरू नहीं होगा। वो जो एग्जिस्टिंग सोशल कैपिटल है उसी के बल पर हमें आगे बढ़ने की जरूरत है। तो और सामने अगर एक बड़ा उद्देश्य रखे तो ये संभव है कि हम एक दूसरे को प्रभावित करें और एक बड़ी कॉज के लिए हम ला सके लोगों को।
थैंक यू सर।
और कोई सवाल है कुछ इधर?
We can go for chair's remarks. Mr. Patel. Yes. Ma'am, please unmute. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Kaustuv. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, Kaustuv Bandyopadhyay ji, for providing such a panoramic view of a wide range of civil society initiatives which have very important presence, and we saw during the pandemic also that they had such an important presence in public life, the hand-holding that was done, which was also social solidarity that it created. And you also raised some of the important questions about ethical, political, also philanthropic considerations, the limitations of what is reasonable and what is unreasonable, who decides, that is I think most important thing, and what is reasonable according to social movement may not be reasonable to the state, so that creates a problem. We have seen so many successful examples of people's mobilization, crowdfunding, various sectors of civil society, including the film industry, all of them came forward at the time of pandemic to run the community kitchen. In fact, Jamila B was the superstar in city of Mumbai, whether it was a distribution of menstrual pads by the local commissioner challenging the corporate elected representatives, reaching out to corporate, running the community kitchens for 2,000 people, and also providing the shelter to homeless. So all these things we have done. I think there is a burnout because for 2 years we have done day and night, people have worked so much, but the things seem to be optimistic, because as Dr. Bandyopadhyay told us, that we have to depend on our social capital, and we have created social capital because we were not ivory tower people who were discussing Gramsci's concept of civil society. It is important, but we still think, but at the same time, we were also rooted in the community. And I think with that optimistic note, I would like to once again comment Dr. Kaustuv's presentation, which is hope generating. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I'd like Dr. Advocate Shalu Nigam to share her remarks.
very wonderful presentation. It has given a lot of insight into, how civil society is working, and there's been like the effect of civil society that, a lot of things have been, changed and improved. And during the COVID, as ma'am has said, that, a lot of improvements have taken place, but just one thing, the word of advice from you for the students who are, interested in the law students or the public policy students or students from any other, streams who would be interested in joining, some research organization or, be a part of civil society. So any word of advice, to the students as just, the last thing, if I could request you, the permission of chair.
Well, you are most welcome to join the civil society sector, and you can join as a professional, you can join as a volunteer. You are most probably you are already part of one or the other civil society group. You might be a member of a youth club, you might be a member of a university group. So those are civil society as well. But if you want to take a kind of professional role in the civil society, so you can contribute through your professional training. If you have studied policy, if you have studied law, if you have studied sociology or other social science, all these professional knowledge would contribute to build a stronger civil society, and a stronger civil society with a purpose to bring more equality in our society. That's the dream we cherish, and we work to contribute to that equality in the society. So you're most welcome to join the force.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Now, with the chair's permission, we can go for the vote of thanks.
Please go ahead. Yeah, Shweta.
As we have come to the end of Day 10 of Law and Public Policy Youth Fellowship, an online National Summer School program, a 2-month online immersive legal awareness and action research certificate training course, and internship program, I, Nikita Bhardwaj, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, would like to propose the formal vote of thanks on behalf of IMPRI, New Delhi. We are grateful to our expert for the Day 10 session, Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam, Advocate Audrey de Mello, and Dr. Kaustuv Bandyopadhyay for taking out their valuable time and giving us an opportunity to learn from this online certificate program. We thank our chair, Professor Vibhuti Patel, and lead advisor, Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam, for convening the session. We thank all of our participants who have raised pertinent questions and actively participated in today's deliberation. We look forward to welcoming you this Wednesday, that is 5th July at 11:30 a.m. for our Day 11th of this certification course by distinguished experts, Advocate Nunalini Deshmukh and Advocate Dr. Albertina Almeida. We are grateful if you are watching us later on YouTube or listening to us on our various podcasts or reading our publications. We hope you continue to join in future to our IMPRI #WebPolicyTalk and #WebPolicyLearning. Wishing you a good day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a good day, everyone.